Well, hello everyone. We're here to review a movie.
Yes, a movie that I recently got Iron Inquisitor Enter as the imperfect being that I am.
For those of you who don't, or it wasn't obvious for, who aren't fans of DBZ, uh, my friend here was trying to imitate Cell, right?
Yeah, imperfect cell.
Perfect
I'll
Cell.
break into that periodically through the review. Now, what are we going to cover for this movie review?
It's just like, cla- probably I would define it as like one of those classic, you know, like Disney live action movies that was like the.
To celebrate the 50th birthday of Mickey Mouse, which was back in 78.
Oh, this movie came out in '78.
Yep, just a year after Star Wars first hit theaters.
Wow. So we were talking about the cat
From
from
outer
outer
space.
space.
It seems a little kooky, but it actually works. It's a lot more sophisticated than it sounds. I could run through a plot summary if you feel like it.
Yeah, go ahead and explain it.
Well, how the film begins is, and feel free to chime in any time, on a farm with a bunch of landing lights coming down. It could be an alien invasion or whatever, but it's this spaceship, and it's a cat that needed to
Yes,
land.
outside comes a an adorable kitty.
Yes, a cat who can speak and has great mental powers. Via the use of his collar, he has great telekinetic abilities. So anyway, the military is called in by this farmer and his wife, and they take the ship that needs repairs back to their base, which is nearby. And this cat is just sneaking around, and they're studying it, and they call together a bunch of scientists to pool their resources. Kind of thing the
And the
cat used.
majority of them have no clue what powers.
Yeah, for 1978, the effects are really good. Like that floating thing. It's just like something out of Flight of the Navigator.
Mm-hmm.
And there's this guy Frank Wilson, which is that the cat takes interest in. They're coming up with ideas, and none of them have any clue. But he's the first one the cat is interested in, so he decides to tail him back to his
Yeah, he's
office.
kind of like this, he's a scientist who has kind of like these unorthodox views, and nobody takes him seriously.
Yeah, that they thinks this power source is the primal mainstream, which is some kind of electromagnetism. Which it's fair. It's kind of grounded enough in reality, real science, which you probably wouldn't get today. But the cat, Zunar J5 slash Doric 47, makes an offer to this Frank Wilson character, which is that if he helps him repair his ship, he will give him a huge advancement in science and technology designs. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And to do that, they're going to have to sneak back onto the base to see what the actual problem with the ship is. I should bring up something at this point. One of the guys who was also in the meeting, garbage expert, was Link. I forget his last name, but Link. He's a gambler, he's a notorious gambler, and that's something to add.
And well, it was a fun film. It was.
Hmm. Yeah,
I mean, there's not a lot of action, but
yeah,
there really doesn't have to be. Like a lot of people would expect more, and
yeah. It's mostly exposition, but there's this funny scene where Link bursts into Frank's apartment, and the cat who he rechristens Jake for convenience is telling him to use the collar that he can use it too. It just has to focus his thoughts, and he's levitating. And he bursts in, he just falls to the ground. He says, "What were you doing?" He says, astronaut exercises." And it's
yeah, that's the thing about this movie. There's a lot of good humor in it.
yeah,
That's one of the
like
reasons it's so fun.
like to hustle him out of the apartment real cat that the to shuffle Link out of the apartment real fast. The cat helps him win a bet with a basketball by just altering it so it goes into the net. So anyway, they head to the base, and I should mention there's this guy who was at the meeting, who Starwood, who's some kind of double agent for some power hungry business tycoon or something. He'll show up later. At the
I
moment,
thought he'd be like connected to the Russians in some way.
possibly he is. We don't get much explained on him, but we don't need to. He's just a bad guy. So what needs to be explained?
Mm-hmm.
He, so anyway, Frank and Jake the cat head on to the base, and this is the thing about this cat's powers is he can levitate Frank, but he also freezes. He can freeze people for like 20 or 30 minutes. Does that whenever they get spotted.
Yeah, all the telepathic and telekinetic and abilities like that was really cool. And I
Yeah,
love how like it isn't overpowered because it has rules, like
limits.
rules and consistency. Like he
Well,
can only freeze someone for like what 20 minutes at a time.
yeah, and yeah, it's good and it's grounded. They don't make them like crazy overpowered where you're dragging down the moon or something. Yeah. And anyway, so when they're on the base, that guy who was at the meeting, who was like this double agent, is following him because he's trying to get into the base too, because he's suspicious of what the meeting was about with the general and his staff. And they make it into the hangar with the ship, and so they begin repairing it. And the Starwood guy is watching them as they do it. But there is a funny scene where Frank
Mm-hmm.
kind of takes a secondary car stored on the ship and just flies around the hangar for a while, just
Yes, that was
just
fun.
goofing off.
Who wouldn't want to do that?
Yeah, surely a sign of perfection in a superior being that chooses to indulge in the recreation of life. Okay. Imperfect self voice aside, yeah, that was a good little fun scene. And what they really need to fix this ship is what they call, this is the details in this movie, is Org 12. Because they admit that they would have a different name for it on this planet. It turns out to be gold. They need $120,000 worth of gold.
Yeah,
So
and I was wondering if it would have been
something contemporary for us.
a
Yeah,
what?
just something contemporary for us because again, it different names for different things on different planets. That's a great detail. You can tell there's thought put into this,
Mm-hmm.
definitely. But anyway, someone outside finds the frozen soldier and they sound the alarm so that Frank and the cat Jake have to make a breakaway. And the guy who was frozen unfreezes in the middle of it. And this is something you notice at the time when we were watching it. This predates ET by a couple of years. Is that they have a flying motorcycle?
Yeah, like I want to go. How does the music go?
Do, 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 do.
Do, 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 or whatever.
Yeah, but I mean, Frank said he couldn't zap the whole base, and since he's the closest thing to an expert on his technology, I'm guessing he was probably right. Couldn't freeze the whole base, so they just had to like levitate over the guards who were at the fence. And the Starwood guy is telling them he gets dumped into a garbage truck.
That was pretty funny.
Yeah. The humor is understated compared to how it probably would be today, but it's more sophisticated to do that. So as it stands, they need to get some gold, and that's $120,000 back then or now just would have been crazy. So who do they turn
Mm-hmm.
to? It turns out this Link character. He knows how to gamble. He knows how to place bets with. So he helps this horse of his win. I should mention that there's a third character though, and don't want to be hashtagged on Twitter, but yeah, it's a woman, Sandy Duncan, a classic actor back in the old days. It's basically like a Star Wars trio, two guys, one girl. You know,
Yeah,
yeah.
I thought she was pretty cute.
Yep, definitely. Sandy Duncan is a classic from the classic era in a Betty White mode. Rip Betty White. But yeah, the character she plays, Liz, has her own cat.
Oh, Lucy Bell. I thought Lucy Bell was so cute.
Yeah, it's a cat
You
like
know,
yours. It's a cat like yours, isn't it?
yeah, like Princess.
Mm-hmm.
A white poof ball with a poof tail. My favorite kind of cat.
Yeah. And wouldn't you know it? Love is in the air between Jaguar / Zunar and this Lucy Bell. No, before they went to the base the previous night, she'd come in with her pet because she had a date with this Frank character, but they made up an excuse about Jake being sick. But the next day, when they're recruiting Link to their cause, she comes in and they still make up that excuse, so she goes to get a vet. I should mention during this point that the Stalwart characters, like this double agent, is spying on this really big retro camcorder thing that's like blinking lights in the size of those retro TV monitors. Any thoughts to add so far about it?
Let's see.
Yeah, because Vec comes along, and because they didn't tell her right away, and they're a bit focused on the game to try and make the money back. Jake is given a trank, and he's knocked out. So yeah, the bet could go very badly. So they try to go back. So they recruit her. The vet storms off, and they try to go and they decide to tell her what's going on, and they have to go back to the gambling pool itself to try and break even. And
Well, that was a cool scene.
yeah, because they're making all these bets. It first off, they decide to play pool to try and get the $100,000. But one thing that happens is Frank has to try and use the car, and it just doesn't work well. All it does is just send the ball shooting and eggs flying, and it doesn't get far. But then Jake wakes up because there's this guy who has like this big liverwurst and onions and bratwurst sandwich. Yes, the gnarliest thing possible that is not 1990s. And it's right near Jake, and it just knocks him back up. And it's a lot better when he decides to help them win the pool game because they decide she should do it. She should be blindfolded, and this other guy, who's like this big pool expert, should get the first break. and it's just
Yeah, the pool scene was pretty good.
yeah, because they make off with 100,000, and it's at this point that the military, who's been in the background investigating, comes to the conclusion that what they're dealing with is a cat and that Frank Wilson is helping him because they ran prints on what was in the ship. And that Starwood reports back to his boss, a guy named Olympus, and he gets interested. He wants the collar. He's because of the videotape he took where he was convincing Link, shooting beer in his face, wrapping him up in towels, and levitating him across the room. That kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So basically it's the military and this Olympus guy that are after them. And and the military bursts in at that point, led by a dude named General Stilton. There's something you told me about General Stilton, which is
Yeah, it's funny because Stilton is a type of cheese,
yeah,
and one of the code words for one of the people that was working for him.
Daddy One calling Big Cheese.
Yeah. And then I finally made this connection. I was like, hey, that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, it's just little things like that that are kind of like very subtle humor. But yeah, and so anyway, General Stilton and his military dudes who have figured it out come to Frank Wilson's house to try and arrest him because, as far as they know, he's collaborating with aliens. But Jake just freezes them. There you go. And he reduces the gold into the component it's going to need, and
he takes the general's uniform, and he's just in his like an undershirt and an underwear.
yeah, but the undershirt is like a classic man's kind of underwear. It's like this Hollywood babe moi kind of thing, from the 40s or whatever. Just think that. And yeah, the plan is to impersonate the general and to get Jake in so that he can get to his ship because when
At first it works.
Yeah.
Because he does sound like him. Or he tries to imitate him.
Just bark a lot, basically. And he's wearing sunglasses, so it's not like some kind of stupid thing. It's like where they're at least trying to show that they're disguising themselves. And plus the cap. And he, it's at this point that they leave Link and Lucy Bell behind to get onto the base. When Jake's ship lifts off, if he isn't on it, they won't come back for like 150 years. And I'm like, yeah, he's going to be stranded on Earth. So they've left Link and Lucy Bell behind, and this Olympus dude comes up and kidnaps them. He wants.
It leads to a really cool sequence with the helicopter and this old biplane.
Yeah, because they take him to the helicopter and send Link back to say, if you want the girl and the cat back, give us the collar. Of course, Jake's smitten with this cat, so he's not going to let that happen. And yeah, he misses his flight. By this point, the military have unfrozen and they're tailing them as they decide to leave the hangar and go after them. And it's at that point, this old biplane is a wreck. It's like, and he still makes it fly, this cat.
Yes, even though like it technically would need a lot of work to run, he's just working the propellers with his mind, so that and it causes to lift off.
Yeah. And in the end, because they're leaving in a helicopter, the bad guys, in the end, it wasn't even some kind of fancy aerial maneuver. I'm sure modern viewers today would find it boring. It's the idiocy of this stalwart dude. He's gonna shoot at them with a gun. He shoots right into the cockpit.
Yeah, he has like this flare gun thing.
Takes out the controls. So when the fuel runs out, they decide they're not going to wait for it, and they just ditch it. There's this funny scene where his two thugs get parachuted, and Olympus has it too. But then Liz says she doesn't have a parachute, and then Olympus tells her, "Then you have a problem." And Starwood says, "I haven't got a parachute either." Then you have the same problem.
You know what I would insert?
Yeah.
In Spider-Man 3, the Tobey Maguire one, there's a scene where he goes, "I missed the part where that's my problem."
Oh yeah,
that would have worked there.
It's the same spirit. It's not my problem. I don't care. Yeah, so basically at that point, once they've left, the villains are just hanging in a tree waiting for the army to find them or starvation. And Jake flies a plane when they get Liz and the Lucy Bell out. Yeah, oh, how about that funny scene where Jake gets a little distracted by the cat that's in the cockpit and he just lowers the plane? I mean, I love that even for a male cat's gonna male cat.
Yep, exactly.
Yes. And because when the general caught up with them, Link decided to stay behind. He told them everything, and they decided treat Jake as a representative of a friendly power if they could get these advancements he promised Frank. And it ends with, this is kind of funny, swearing him in as a citizen of the United States of America. It's
that was pretty funny. He levitates the judge.
Yeah, it's a little bit childish, but it's also very sophisticated, which you don't get nowadays for childish. You just get, I mean, it. So that was the summary for the movie, and I now turn to my friend here to ask you your opinion and your thought processes on it.
I actually never knew about this movie. Like, I remember you told me about it a few months ago, and I was like, oh.
I watched it a lot as a kid. It was everywhere in the 90s. Classic. And to think
since it was made from Disney, I did sort of get a similar vibe from,
as E.T.?
Yeah, E.T. and Flight of the Navigator. It had that same spirit.
That same kid empowerment stuff without being completely juvenile. Because there's sophistication, there's real details in science, like you say. It has a foundation. Felt like there was real thought put into the writing of it. If you're an action junkie, though, or someone who needs big energy and faster effects, you're probably not going to like it.
Yeah, because there isn't that much action, like I said, but, there doesn't need to be.
Yeah,
like, if they remade this, which, I better not give anybody ideas, they would put so much more action and...
for one thing,
all that.
Let me say I'm not against race swaps or gender swaps in general if they do something interesting. But if it's for a pointless remake, then I'm against them. And that's what this would be. They probably race swap some of the characters, and I'm like, or gender swap them or something like that. I don't really care for that. And what else would they do? I don't know it. Harry Morgan is this General Stilton character. You know him. He's also a classic actor like Sandy Duncan and, Ken Barry. That's the guy who plays Frank Wilson. I don't know if those names mean anything. Your retro geek, definitely check it out.
Yes, and the General, he was pretty good too.
Yeah. He was on Support Your Local Sheriff and Support Your Local Gunfighter. Also on Third Rock from the Sun. He's
I just love how no nonsense he was.
Yeah, the stereotype of the General.
But it's done in a way where it's really funny.
Yeah.
Like, do you remember the scene where the computer was searching for information and such?
And
Like
they're
he
talking
thought,
about
is there something wrong with this?
feeless cat as it's lifting down that, and then they try to redo it, and it says, "Nope, definitely a cat." Oh, and he's about to hit it again until he realizes they went to the pool with a cat. They reported that from their agents in the field, so they realize
Yes.
it's a cat.
And that's another thing I like about this movie, like cats, because I'm a huge cat lover now.
Yes,
So
we've had a dozen cats in our lifetime where I live, and just a lot of cats. I love cats too. Cats are superior, and we know it.
yes, you can tell they have that look and walk of superiority.
This is what it amounted to being quote unquote childish back then to make a kids movie, just throwing something ridiculous like a cat from outer space. But the way this is written and directed nowadays, it's very hoity-toity, sophisticated. Because they don't go as low as they could be, and it's since it's a Disney movie, they could totally remake it anytime they want to. Just they
I
could.
mean, aren't they doing the Flight of the Navigator?
Yeah, I'm in short circuit it. It's
Oh.
those they're never gonna stop it. But yeah, uh, I'm trying to think what they would do in a reboot that would change it. I mean, an older plane. I don't know. It like the chase at the end. Oh, for one thing, they'd have cell phones, wouldn't they? Internet cell phones, and that would be a huge game changer. You got to remember, the world of the late '70s didn't even have cell phones. They had car phones. They had mostly landlines, but they had those phone booths that were more like from the first Superman movie, not those phone booths, kind of like a kiosk. And it was just mostly
And
phones and
honestly, Barbie, you would rather be back then than now.
yeah. I mean, things were a bit more personalized than they were depersonalized like now. I mean, yeah, but it's, something I should mention is for this cat, whoever trained it in the movie was doing a really good job because it was very convincing, you know,
Yeah, I wonder how many takes it took too.
because the cat is almost acting like the voice coming out of it. It's a very convincing illusion, and the effects were just like, I don't know, something from the first Star Wars, the first Superman movie. Maybe not quite up to those levels, but just as good, honestly.
Yeah, good enough.
It, and it's just a harmless little romp, like things happen too easily. Because in real life, an alien situation like this, the military just wouldn't instantly trust them. But you don't have to. It's meant to be a harmless little diversion.
Yep. And it's just a fun movie.
Yeah, but I would seriously recommend people to check it out. And if you want something more sophisticated with more meat on its bones, or you're a retro geek, if you're just in that action fix, which hey, no judgment, then I don't think you're probably gonna like it. You
Yeah, I
know,
mean, well, there's nothing wrong with a lot of action. Sometimes,
yeah, that's Snickers.
yep.
So, any closing thoughts before I head off to find and consume Android 17 and 18?
Kitties are cute. Kitties are cute.
Hmm, a succinct and precise take, my friend. Yes, I believe I shall slither off right now.
And since this was a Disney movie, you can probably easily find it on Disney Plus. I'm pretty sure it's on there. So, anyways, hope you enjoyed our little discussion, and we'll see you whenever we do a review for whatever Star Wars related or not.